The alien ship was silent, except for the soft hum of its engines. In one of the long, cold chambers, a strange creature lay on a metal bed. He was not like the others, not like the tall, scaled warriors or the wing guards. He was human. The aliens had captured him on a forgotten planet, a world they thought was weak and useless. The human had been brought as nothing more than a curiosity, a fragile animal to study. But to her eyes, to the alien beauty who first saw him, he was a mystery. She had seen thousands of species in her life, some with hard shells, some with glowing eyes, others with armor thick as stone. But this human, he looked soft, unprotected, fragile. His skin had no scales, no fur, no armor, and yet he slept calmly, as if he had no fear of death. The chamber was cold, colder than the mountain peaks of her world. Even the alien guards wore protective layers, their bodies shivering from the freezing air. But the human slept uncovered, his chest rising and falling slowly, his breath steady and calm. The alien beauty's eyes widened. "How can this be?" she whispered to herself. She stepped closer, her long silver hair brushing against her shoulders. The human did not move, his lips curved in the faintest smile, as if he were lost in a dream. It was not normal, it was not possible. Every creature feared the cold. Every creature wrapped itself for protection. But this one did not. Rumors had already begun among the crew. They called him cursed. They said his kind were strange. The humans carried secrets in their blood. But none of them dared to stay close to him for long. Only she, the alien beauty, stayed to watch. She had studied living beings since she was young. She thought she understood strength and weakness. But now her mind was full of questions. Was this human strong? Or was he simply too foolish to fear? The light above flickered as the ship moved through dark space. The shadows danced across the human's face. For a moment, she thought she saw something hidden there. Not weakness, not fragility, but something deeper. A willpower that burned like an unseen flame. The alien beauty's heart beat faster. She turned her gaze away, yet her eyes always returned to him. She felt something strange, something she had never felt before. It was not fear and not just curiosity. It was fascination. One of the guards entered the chamber, his claws clicking on the floor. "Why do you waste time here?" he asked, his voice sharp. "He is nothing but prey." But she shook her head. "No prey sleeps like this," she whispered. "No prey defies the cold." The guard laughed. "Then watch him freeze. By the next cycle, his body will be ice." And he left with a cruel smile. But she did not laugh. She stayed. And as the hours passed, the human did not freeze. He did not wake. He did not shiver. He simply slept, calm and steady, as if the cold had no power over him. Her fingers brushed against the glass barrier between them. "What are you?" she whispered again. "Why are you not afraid?" The ship entered a dark nebula, the stars outside hidden in thick clouds. Strange lights flashed through the windows. The crew grew restless, but the human slept on, untouched, unbothered. Even in the heart of danger, he looked at peace. She pressed her palm against the barrier. Her mind raced with thoughts she could not control. Could this fragile-looking being hide a strength greater than any she had ever seen? Could his calmness be a weapon? Or was he truly something more, something the galaxy itself had yet to understand? Her people had always believed strength came from armor, from weapons, from fear. But as she watched the human, she began to wonder. Maybe true strength was something else. Something silent, something invisible. Something like this. The alien beauty stepped back, her heart trembling. She knew this was only the beginning. This human was not prey. He was a mystery, and mysteries were dangerous. She turned, but before leaving, she looked one last time. The human shifted slightly in his sleep, his lips moving as if speaking in a dream. And though she could not understand his language, the sound was soft, gentle, almost like music. It made her chest tighten. It made her want to know more. The doors closed behind her, the chamber growing silent once again. But in her mind, the question screamed louder than ever. Who was this human? Why did he sleep uncovered? And why did his presence shake her heart more than any war or weapon ever had? She did not know the answers yet, but deep inside, she felt the truth. This was not the end. This was the beginning. The galaxy was not ready, and neither was she. The next cycle began, and the alien ship floated through the black sea of stars. In the observation hall, she stood again, staring at the human. Her people had laughed to her the night before, saying the fragile creature would be frozen by now. But he was still alive, still breathing, still uncovered. The alien beauty's silver eyes narrowed. She wanted to understand him, yet the more she looked, the less sense he made. Why would such a soft creature defy the freezing air? Why would he rest as if the universe itself could not harm him? She moved closer to the chamber, her steps light against the metal floor. The guards outside gave her strange looks, but none dared to stop her. They too were whispering now. Some said the human was cursed. Others said he carried the spirit of death. But none could explain how he survived. Inside the chamber, the human finally moved. He stretched, slow and calm, like a predator waking from a safe den. But there was no safe den here, only cold steel and watching eyes. Still, his face showed no fear, only quiet strength. She gasped softly, and her heart began to beat faster. Her curiosity grew heavier, but with it came something else, a strange pressure in her chest. It was not only fascination anymore. It was fear. Fear not of his claws, because he had none, not of his armor, because he wore none, not of his weapons, because he carried none, but fear of the unknown, fear of what he might be. She remembered her father's words from long ago. The most dangerous beings are not the loud ones, but the silent ones. And here was silence itself. A human who did not cry, did not beg, did not shake. He simply was. The human sat up at last, his eyes opening slowly. They were strange eyes, not glowing like hers, not sharp like the guards, but deep, dark, and filled with something she had no word for. When his gaze met hers, she froze. It felt as though he saw through her, as if every secret she carried was now his. She turned quickly, pretending to study her datapad, but her fingers trembled. The human's eyes had not been full of rage or fear. They had been calm. And somehow, that calmness frightened her more than any roar or scream could. Later, in the council chamber, she heard the officers speak. The human must be tested, they said. We will learn his limits. We will see what he is. Their voices were sharp, cruel. They believed he was weak. They believed he would break. But she was not so sure. When she returned to the observation hall that night, she found him awake. He sat with his back against the wall, his hands folded loosely, his eyes half closed, but his breathing steady. Again, no blanket, no shield. Again, no fear. The alien beauty pressed her hand to the glass. For the first time, she spoke aloud to him, even though he could not understand. You should be afraid, she whispered. You should be begging, shivering, crying, but you are not. Why? The human tilted his head slightly. It was as if he felt her voice, even if he did not know her words. He smiled faintly, and in that moment her blood ran cold, because that smile was not a prisoner. It was the smile of someone who knew more than she did. She stepped back, her heart racing. Fear coiled around her like smoke, not because he was dangerous in the way her people understood, but because he was dangerous in a way she could not yet name. For the first time in her life, she questioned her own knowledge. She had studied beasts, armies, weapons, and empires, but never had she studied a human. Never had she faced a being so fragile and yet so terrifying. She whispered to herself as she left the chamber, "Curiosity is dangerous." Her voice trembled, but fear of him is worse. The council had made its choice. The human was not to be left alone any longer. They wanted answers. They wanted to see his limits. And so the test began. The alien beauty stood in the high chamber, her silver eyes fixed on the arena below. Guards surrounded the human, their armor shining, their weapons sharp. He stood barefoot on the cold floor, no shield, no weapon, no protection. To the aliens, he looked like prey. To her, he looked like a riddle wrapped in soft skin. The first test was simple. They released icy winds into the chamber, winds colder than stone. Even the guards who operated the machines wore heated suits. But the human stood without one. His breath turned white in the air, his lips pale. Yet he did not fall, he did not cry. He simply hugged his arms around himself. His body shook, but his eyes stayed steady. See, one of the commanders laughed. He is weak, he trembles already. But the alien beauty leaned forward. No, it was not weakness, she realized. It was survival. He did not resist the cold like a warrior. He endured it like a survivor. The winds howled for hours. Finally, the machines shut down. The human dropped to his knees, his skin raw and red. But his head stayed lifted, his eyes unbroken. He was alive. The council was not pleased. Again, they commanded, let him face something stronger. The next test was fear. They released a beast into the chamber. A creature twice the human size, with teeth sharp as blades. The guards expected him to run, to scream, but he did not. The human stood very still. His breathing slowed, his eyes locked on the beast. The alien beauty's hands tightened at her side. She expected him to die in moments. But then, something strange happened. The beast circled him, growling, and the human did not move. He only stepped back once, slow and careful. No sudden motion, no loud cry. The beast grew confused. It was used to prey that ran, prey that panicked. But this prey was calm. The human bent down, picked up a broken piece of chain from the floor. It was nothing, just a scrap of metal. But he held it like a weapon, not with fear, but with purpose. The beast lunged. The human dodged, rolling aside. He struck the beast's eye with the chain. Not strong enough to kill, but strong enough to make the monster roar in pain and retreat. The alien beauty's lips parted in shock. The human did not have claws or teeth or power, but he had something else. He had cleverness. He had the will to use even the smallest thing to survive. The council roared with anger. This proves nothing, one shouted. He is only lucky. But she could see it in their faces. Fear was growing, even among them. The final test came. The chamber was filled with fire and smoke. Flames licked the walls, heat seared the air. Even the aliens watching from behind glass stepped back, but the human was trapped inside. She pressed her hand against the glass. Her heart pounded in her chest. No, not fire, she whispered. Fire was merciless. Fire left nothing but ash. Yet through the smoke, she saw movement. The human had torn part of his thin clothing. He wrapped it around his mouth, covering his nose. He crouched low, crawling beneath the thick smoke. Using the ground itself as a shield, she could barely see him, but her eyes followed every shift, every movement. He was not panicking. He was not wasting breath. He was thinking. He was surviving. When the fire finally died, when the smoke cleared, the human stood again, coughing, his skin burned in places. But his eyes, those deep, dark eyes, still burned brighter than the flames. Silence fell in the council hall. No one spoke, no one laughed now. The human was scarred, weak in body, but still alive. And in his survival, he had defied them all. The alien beauty felt her chest tighten. She should have been pleased, but instead she trembled. This was no ordinary creature. This was not weakness at all. It was a strength her people had never understood. The human looked up, his gaze sweeping across the glass where she stood, and once again their eyes met. He smiled, just a faint smile, but it was enough to make her heart stumble, because that smile carried a message she could not ignore. I will not break. The alien ship drifted through endless space, silent as a tomb. But inside the lower decks, darkness ruled. The power cells had weakened during the storm, and parts of the ship lost their light. Cold spread like a shadow, creeping into every hall, every chamber. The alien beauty walked with her torch crystal in hand. Its pale glow kept the cold away, but only just. She had grown up with such crystals. Every alien had. They gave light, they gave warmth, but only as long as the ship's core fed them. And now, even the crystals flickered. The guards muttered nervously. Without light, without power, the cold could kill even the strongest of them. And in that moment, she thought of him, the human. She hurried down the corridors, her breath visible in the icy air. When she reached his chamber, her steps froze. Through the small viewing window, she saw something impossible. The human was awake, crouched near the floor, and in front of him danced a small flame. Her heart leapt to her throat. Fire, real fire, not crystal light, not plasma energy, but fire born from spark and fuel, raw and alive. It flickered gold and red, shadows moving across his face. He had taken pieces of metal, scraps of cloth, and something she could not name, and with only his hands, he had created warmth. The alien beauty pressed her palm against the glass, her silver eyes wide with shock. For her people, fire was a thing of the past, a legend of primitive times. They did not touch it, they did not need it. They relied on machines. But this human, stripped of everything, had called it back as if it were his old friend. The guards behind her gasped. One of them hissed, "It is dangerous. He makes a weapon." Another muttered, "No, it is more than a weapon. It is control of nature itself." But she said nothing. She could not move her eyes from him. The flame glowed brighter, feeding on the scraps. The human held his hands near it, his body shaking but his face calm. He warmed himself without fear, without shame. And then, in the silence, he did something even stranger. He smiled. The alien beauty's chest tightened. The firelight danced in his dark eyes. And for the first time, she saw him not as prey, not as fragile, but as something far more dangerous, something her people had forgotten long ago. The human turned his head slightly. Through the glass, his gaze found hers. For a heartbeat, their worlds connected. Her cold, ordered world of machines and rules, and his burning, wild world of survival and will. She whispered to herself, "What kind of creature are you?" The flame grew stronger, and soon, even the guards who mocked him earlier crept closer. They felt its heat, saw its glow, and though none of them would admit it, a secret thought bloomed in their minds. We are stronger with him than without him. The council, however, was furious. When news of the fire reached their ears, they shouted in rage. "He defies us. He plays with power too old, too dangerous." But beneath their anger was fear, for they knew what the beauty had seen, that a human did not need machines, did not need armor. He could build survival with his bare hands. That night, as the ship drifted through the void, she stayed longer outside his chamber. The others left, muttering, but she remained, her silver hair lit by the flicker of his flame. He sat on the floor, feeding the fire, and for the first time, she did not see him as a prisoner. She saw him as something else, something her heart struggled to name. The human leaned back against the wall, his body weak, his movements slow, yet in that small fire, he carried a strength greater than her people's weapons. He carried memory, knowledge, and a defiance that no storm, no cold, no chain could break. The alien beauty touched the glass, her voice barely a whisper. "You are changing everything." And deep inside, though she would never say it aloud, she feared it was true, not just for her, but for the entire galaxy. Secret connection. The flame burned low, but it still lived. Its soft glow touched the metal walls of the chamber, painting shadows that danced like silent ghosts. The human sat close to it, his hands steady, feeding the fire with scraps. To him, it was normal, something he had always known, but to her, it was a miracle. The alien beauty stood beyond the glass, her breath fogging the surface. She had come again, though she told no one. Her steps were silent, her eyes fixed on him. She did not understand why she kept returning. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps fear, or perhaps something else she dared not name. The human shifted suddenly, his dark eyes lifting, and for the first time, he caught her watching. She froze, her heart leaping to her throat. His gaze was steady calm, not accusing, not mocking, only knowing. Slowly, he lifted his hand from the fire, not in anger, not in threat, but in greeting, a simple motion, palm open, her chest tightened. No alien had ever done such a gesture to her. It felt strange, almost gentle, almost human. Her own hand trembled. Then, against every rule, she raised her palm and placed it against the glass. For a heartbeat, their hands aligned, separated by the barrier, but close enough that it felt like something real. The human smiled faintly, a small curve of lips, warm as the flame before him. And though no words were spoken, she understood. He was not her enemy. He was not afraid of her. And somehow, he wanted her to know that. She pulled her hand back quickly, her cheeks flushing with heat. Her mind screamed at her. This is wrong. This is dangerous. He was a prisoner. He was not one of them. But her heart whispered differently. Her heart told her she had seen more truth in his eyes than in the council's endless words. The next cycle, she returned again. This time she carried something small, hidden beneath her cloak. A piece of dried food, rough but edible. She waited until the guards turned away. Then she placed it in the small opening used for supplies. The human looked at it, then at her. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then he took it, not at once, and ate. Her chest tightened again, not from fear, but from something deeper. It was a simple thing, food shared, yet it felt like the first thread of a bridge between their worlds. Later, she sat in her quarters, unable to rest. Her mind returned again and again to his eyes, his smile, his hand against the glass. She had studied life all her years, but never had she studied a creature who made her heart tremble this way. She whispered to herself, "Why do I feel this? Why do I care for him?" The next time she visited, he was already waiting. He sat near the flame, his eyes half closed. But when he saw her, he lifted his hand again. And this time, she did not hesitate. She pressed her palm to the glass, steady and sure. The connection was silent, yet it spoke louder than words. She could almost feel his warmth through the barrier. She could almost believe the glass was gone. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as a warrior, not as a council daughter, but as herself. A sound broke the moment, the heavy steps of a guard. She pulled back quickly, her heart racing. The human lowered his hand, his expression calm again. The guard did not notice, but she knew how close they had come to being discovered. That night, she could not sleep. The flame in his chamber burned in her mind. The warmth of his hand against the glass lingered in her memory. And in her heart, a question grew larger and louder. Was she protecting him, or was he the one protecting her from the cold emptiness of her world? She whispered into the dark, "This is only the beginning." Her voice trembled, and she knew she was right, because the bond between them was no longer curiosity, no longer fear. It was something new, fragile but strong, a secret connection, and secrets in a galaxy built on rules. Well, the most dangerous thing of all, the alarms shook the ship. Red light flashed through every corridor, warning of danger. The alien beauty rushed to the viewing deck, her silver eyes wide with fear. Something had entered the lower bay, something the guards could barely control. The chamber doors groaned, metal bending, and from the shadows came the beast. It was a monster bred for war, taller than 3 men, its jaws dripping with venom. Its claws cut through steel like soft cloth. Even the armored guards stepped back in fear. Inside the chamber stood the human. He had no armor, no weapon, nothing but his bare hands. The alien beauty's breath caught in her throat. This was not a test arranged by the council. This was real, and he was trapped. The guard shouted, "Let the beast tear him apart. We will study what remains." Others laughed nervously, trying to hide their own fear. But she did not laugh. Her heart raced. She wanted to scream, to stop it, but her voice froze. The beast roared, a sound that shook the walls. It charged forward, claws raised. The human did not run. He did not scream. He stepped aside at the last moment, rolling across the floor. The beast smashed into the wall, sparks flying from torn metal. The alien beauty pressed her hand against the glass. Her eyes locked on him. He was not strong like the beast. He was not fast like her people, but he was clever. Every move was careful, every step chosen. He watched, he learned. The beast circled him again, angry now. The human crouched low, picking up a broken pipe from the floor. It was small, useless to most, but in his hands it became a weapon, not sharp enough to kill, but enough to strike at the right moment. The beast lunged again. The human swung the pipe into its leg joint. The creature howled, stumbling for a breath. It was not defeated, but it was slowed. He had found its weakness. The alien beauty gasped. Her people fought with brute strength, but the human fought with mind. He turned weakness into a weapon. He turned survival into art. The battle dragged on, the human's body bruised and bleeding. Yet his eyes never dimmed. Each time he fell, he rose again. Each time the beast struck, he found a way to strike back. Not harder, but smarter. Not with rage, but with will. At last, the beast raised its claws for a final blow. The human, broken and weak, did something none expected. He did not strike, he did not dodge. He stepped forward, closer to the monster's face. And he shouted, not in fear, but in defiance. A sound raw and human. A sound that shook even the watching guards. The beast froze, confused. It had faced prey that screamed in terror, but never prey that roared back. The human's voice carried no power of weapons, but it carried something greater, the unbreakable spirit of one who refuses to surrender. In that pause, he drove the broken pipe deep into the beast's side. The creature staggered, roaring in pain. It thrashed wildly, then crashed to the ground, shaking the entire chamber. The silence that followed was heavy. The human stood over the fallen beast, his chest rising and falling, his body weak, but his eyes stronger than ever. The alien beauty's hands trembled. Her lips parted in awe. He had done the impossible, not with strength, not with power, but with will, with courage. The guards muttered in disbelief. One whispered, "He is not prey." Another growled, "No, he is something else." The human looked up at the glass, his gaze finding hers once again. And this time, she could not look away. His face was pale, his body broken, but his eyes burned with fire, a fire that told her the truth she had feared to admit. He was stronger than any of them, not because of his body, but because of his spirit. Her chest ached, her voice shaking as she whispered to herself, "This is the hidden strength." And she knew the galaxy would never understand it, not until it was too late. The beast lay silent, its body broken, its breath gone. Smoke rose from the damaged chamber, the air heavy with the scent of metal and blood. The guards whispered among themselves, their voices low with fear. None dared to step inside, and at the center of it all stood the human. He was no longer just a prisoner, no longer just a fragile creature in their eyes. His body was battered, his skin cut, his chest heaving, yet he stood tall, his eyes still burning with life. A life too stubborn to be taken. The alien beauty pressed her hand against the glass. Her heart pounded wildly. She had watched every moment, every strike, every fall. She had seen him rise again and again when logic said he should have stayed down. And now, as their eyes met, she knew this was no weakness. This was something greater. The council arrived, their robes flowing, their voices sharp. "He is dangerous," one shouted. "He cannot be trusted," another hissed. But their anger could not hide their fear. For in the human, they had seen something they could not understand. The alien beauty stepped forward. "No," she said softly, but her voice carried strength. "He is not dangerous because of weapons or claws." Her silver eyes never left the human's face. "He is dangerous because he cannot be broken." The council scoffed. "He is fragile, his body is weak." But she shook her head. "His strength is not in his body," she whispered. "It is in his will, in his spirit." The human shifted, his hand pressed against his wound. Yet he still managed a faint smile. And in that small smile, she saw the truth more clearly than ever. Her people had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival without machines. They had forgotten what it meant to stand against the impossible with nothing but willpower. But humans had not forgotten. Humans carried that fire inside them, a fire older than stars. The guards looked at him with unease. Some stepped back, for they too felt it now. The quiet, terrifying truth. This human, and perhaps all his kind, were not prey. They were survivors. And survivors could shape the galaxy. The alien beauty's chest tightened. She thought of the nights she had watched him sleep uncovered, of the flame he had built with his hands, of the way he had stood against the beast, refusing to surrender. And she whispered to herself, "The galaxy is not ready for humans." The council debated, their voices rising. Some demanded his death. Others demanded more tests. But she remained silent, her eyes never leaving him, because she understood something none of them wanted to face. The human was not just one man. He was a mirror of his entire species, a sign of what they could endure, what they could achieve, and what they could become. The flame in his spirit was not small. It was endless. It was the kind of strength that could topple empires. Not with power, not with fear, but with courage, with hope. The human leaned back against the wall, his eyes half closed. But even in exhaustion, he did not look defeated. He looked like someone waiting for the right moment to rise again. The alien beauty placed her palm against the glass one last time. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "You are the most dangerous being I have ever seen, because you are unbreakable." For the first time in her life, she felt small, not because she was weak, but because she had glimpsed something larger than her world, something larger than her people's pride, a truth too vast to ignore. And as the human closed his eyes, resting at last, she knew deep inside her heart, this was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning. Because if one fragile, scarred, uncovered human could stand against the cold, the council, and the beast, then what would happen when the galaxy met all of them? The thought made her shiver, not with fear, but with awe. And the flame of his spirit, once hidden, now burned inside her too.